Welcome to 8-Bit Bootcamp. In this video we'll be going over the basics of the Armies factions, Renegades and Guardians. Both factions share the same style of economy as well as a very similar build order opening. The way you play both factions out on the field is very different. Renegades are a very good all-around faction and the Guardians have a very strong harassment potential. First, let's talk about setting up the Army's economy and how to keep it efficient. This applies to both factions. Both armies harvest resources from the nodes with their harvester. This is very similar to the old style of Westwood RTS games like Command & Conquer and Dune. They drive to the resource node, they fill up, and they take it back to their closest refinery. So how do we make this efficient? We first need to build our refineries as close as we can to the resource node. The further away our refinery is from the resource node, the longer it takes because of the travel distance. If we have a refinery this close, we minimise the amount of travel time. Another way to make this effective is to add in an extra harvester. There is just enough time for one harvester to be loading while the other unloads. They then swap positions. This way you always have one harvester dropping off money. You may also notice that sometimes you have one harvester waiting to drop off. This is because the unload time takes slightly longer than the load time. Don't worry though, as long as your refinery is built within 8 squares, this will work. You can also oversaturate a route. If we were to add in another harvester, you then have a harvester doing nothing as it can't load or unload. This harvester's time is then wasted. We don't want this to happen as it becomes a waste of money and essentially is not very effective. This should never happen. This is too many harvesters. As long as we have 2 harvesters with one refinery within 8 squares, you will always keep your economy efficient for that node. So how do we reach a resource node that is not near your starting position? We creep with buildings. Each building has an area of influence around it that you can build in. Every building you put down should be built as far away as possible from another building in the direction of a resource node or towards a strategic point like a choke point or some high ground. You end up with a chain like this. This mechanic allows you to traverse the map with your buildings throughout the game, offering a larger building influence. If you're expecting to be attacked where you have no units along your building chain, you can just change your primary production building by selecting them and right-clicking on the ground to set its rally point. Units will then be produced from the selected building to the rally point, covering your weakness. Okay, so we have a basic grasp of the economy and base creeping mechanics. Let's set you up with a basic build order that you can build every game to make sure you get off on the right foot. Please be aware that build orders become very map specific, but this build order should work on around 90% of maps in the game. We first start with the refinery. We build it as close as we can towards the closest resource node. Coupled with the harvester that armies start with, you already have your first node working effectively. We then build a barracks and produce 2 extra units. No more than 2, otherwise you won't have the money to spare for the rest of the build order. We then build a motor pool. As soon as it's finished, we start producing a harvester from it. We also immediately put down another refinery as soon as the motor pool is finished. Both the refinery and harvester should finish around the same time, setting up your second node's economy effectively. This will cause you to power down, which is okay as our next building is a power plant. This should give you enough power to decide what you want to do next. This build order should take you to around 1 minute 30 in the game. You're free to do whatever you want next. If the map is large, build a tech lab. If the map is small or your enemy is close, don't waste time into a technology centre just yet. Build some extra production buildings and produce an army to defend yourself with. Your economy should be stable until around the 6-minute mark. If you've been constructing production buildings, you might start to drain a little too much. Experiment each game. It might take you some time to get the right buildings for the right situation. Sometimes it's wise to stay with your low-tech units to defend and harass. Other times it might be wise to get a tech lab and an air control to offer air support and air harassment. If you're playing a team game and you know you're safe, maybe tech straight into the radar or even to the super weapon so you can offer your friends late game defenses. So, we know what buildings to build, in what order and where. So what about our units? What units do we build? The 8-bit series relies heavily on a rock, paper, scissors type of balance. There are 6 different attack types and 4 armor types. Normal damage deals the same amount of damage to all armor types. Light damage units that fire bullets like the MG infantry or the MG helicopter deal extra damage to infantry, but very little to vehicle and structures. Pierce damage units like RPGs and rocket helicopters deal extra damage to vehicles and aircraft. Siege damage units like tanks and heavy tanks deal extra damage to buildings. Heavy damage, like from the artillery, deals extra damage to both infantry and vehicles. Fire damage deals extra damage to infantry, aircraft and structures with very little towards vehicles, and explosive damage deals extra damage to infantry and vehicles. Your units fall under these categories. An army composition should consist of counters to the units you expect on the field. A good mixture of units is always best. You'll be ready for every situation. It's up to you as the commander to make sure you make the most out of them on the field. If you ever get lost, you can look up replays of other players. Any players that are doing anything I've explained in this video should have a good grasp of the factions. So if you're a beginner to Renegades, I recommend building rocket infantry from your barracks with some engineers to keep your army alive once you have the tech building. From the motor pool, I suggest a mixture of armoured cars, tanks and artillery units. They all take a good role on the battlefield. Artillery punishes players that bunch up their units, so more artillery in your unit composition is generally a good idea. From your air control, I recommend again a mixture of units. MG helicopters can hit infantry from a distance and offer some good harassment options early on, and are very quick. The rocket helicopters are great at harassing vehicles, buildings and enemy players' economy. If you understand how to drop, you can also get a Chinook, fill it with infantry and drop it behind an enemy base and let them go to work. So moving on to the Guardians. Guardians offer a very different approach to their military. They start with the engineer unlocked first, meaning they can heal their units from the start. Grenade infantry also deal a fair amount of damage to both infantry and vehicles, if you can get them to hit. The early rocket cars from the motor pool means they can harass enemy players' vehicles and economy early on. They don't have much health though, so be careful when doing hit and runs. Scorch tank and engineer combo can be very strong too, if you can get them close enough. The Guardian's artillery has a very long range but a low splash damage radius. They also deal more damage towards buildings than units, so try to keep them for sieging purposes only. Spectres are great for late game hit and runs on enemy units. They stay invisible until they are attacked or they attack something. Guardians also have a very unique air tech. They can build anti-air drones which suicide themselves, so try to keep them spread out and use them for scouting early on. If you're going to send them in to attack, try to keep them in twos, otherwise they will all explode on nothing like this, and they will be wasted. Once you hit the radar tech, the heavy drone is also a very good all-round aircraft. It can fire both missiles and bullets, depending on which target that it's firing at. If you can use the Guardian's composition correctly, you will be harassing your opponent nearly all game, and you will also be applying lots of pressure to them. A player under pressure will make mistakes that you can capitalise on. A few things to be aware of for both factions. These vehicles will crush unarmoured infantry. This mechanic can sometimes be a game ender, so try to keep your infantry away from them. I would recommend trying to add the APCs and tanks into your unit compositions just so you can squish infantry units. Be warned, a good player will be able to micro their infantry around this and they will not be squished, so it is a risky strategy. All stealth units will stay stealthed until they are attacked by something that can attack ground using the Alt and right mouse button, or until they attack. This should be enough for you to get off the ground as an Armies player. The rest is just practice and patience. I would recommend having a quick read through the in-game guide and even looking at the hotkeys in the game options to see how you can improve how you play. Real-time strategy games take time and effort to learn to play. You will not become a professional within a week, but you can considerably increase how good you are as a player by realising your mistakes. So, if you feel like you've lost a game and you feel like you've made a mistake, always go back, go to your replays and check. See what you did wrong. See how you can try and change what you do next game. But more importantly, make sure that you try and have fun. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Woxy. I hope this helps some of you beginners out there. Thank you very much and I'll see you later.